Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'll be sharing a recipe for making sugar cookies with royal icing. I'm making this easy so that children can participate with their parents and make something special for Mother's Day. Let's have a look at the ingredients that you will need. For the cookie dough, we will need 95 grams of butter, 60 grams of brown sugar, 60 grams of white sugar, and 40 grams of egg. We will separate out 15 grams of the egg white from the total egg to use for the royal icing. Still, for the dough, you will need 195 grams of plain flour, 30 grams of corn flour, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of vanilla flavor. The 80 grams of icing sugar is for the royal icing. To start with, separate the egg white and egg yolk. Then measure out 15 grams of egg white into a clean mixing bowl to use for the icing later on. The rest of the egg will be used in the cookie recipe. Let's start by making the cookie dough. Place the butter, brown sugar and white sugar in a mixing bowl. You will then use an electrical hand mixer to beat it for a few minutes until it is soft and the color turns pale. Use a spatula to scrape down the sides of the bowl and feel that the mixture is soft and see that everything is well combined. Next, we will add the 40 grams of egg and half a teaspoon of vanilla flavor. We will then continue to beat it with the electrical hand mixer until the mixture is well combined. It will take about a minute. This looks good. Use your spatula again to scrape down the sides of the bowl and to check that everything is well mixed. This looks perfect. The next step is to sift in the dry ingredients. Sift the plain flour, corn flour and salt together into the mixing bowl. Start by stirring the butter and flour together with a spatula. If we use the electrical hand mixer, at this point the flour will fly everywhere. Complete the mixing process by using the hand mixer just for a final bit to get everything well combined. It should make a nice firm dough that you should be able to roll out and cut with a cookie cutter. This looks perfect. When we make cookie dough, it is important to handle the dough as little as possible actually. The more you handle the dough, the tougher your cookies will be. I prefer rolling the cookie dough out between two sheets of baking paper. This way it will not stick onto the tabletop. It's much easier to handle. Place it in the one half of the paper, cover it with the other half of the paper and flatten it out with your hands. We are then going to use a rolling pin to flatten the dough further. Use a pushing motion to push the dough up and down so that it can flatten and spread in the paper. We are going to continue to roll the dough out until it's about 5 millimeters in thickness. The way that I prefer rolling is to lift up my pin, putting it in the center of the dough and then rolling it up. Then lift up the pin and put it on the center and roll down. This is more efficient than rolling all the way from the bottom to the top. If you see some bits of the dough creeping out from your paper, you can just cut it away and then put it at the areas of the paper where there's less dough. By paying a little bit more attention to the rolling at this point, it will be so much easier to cut your cookies later on. If you get the correct thickness before you chill the dough, you wouldn't need to roll the dough again before you start cutting your cookies. I'm going to place the dough on a baking tray and place it in the fridge for about half an hour to chill. This piece of dough is the one that I made earlier this morning to pre-bake some cookies. It's really nice and cold, and you can see that it's actually hard. If it's hard like this, it is easier to cut out the shapes. Since I'm planning something for Mother's Day, I've chosen to use heart-shaped cutters for this project. My daughter also made letter M templates from paper that I will use to cut out 2 M's to spell the word mom. It's important that you keep all the cookies that goes onto the baking tray at the same size and thickness so that it can bake evenly. If you have bigger cookies and smaller cookies, or thicker and thinner cookies, it will not bake evenly and you will have some cookies that burn in the oven. Now I've come to a point where I can't cut any more shapes from this piece of dough. I would need to re-roll the dough. Be careful not to handle it too much or to squash it with your warm hands. Just push everything back to the center of the baking paper onto a pile and start rolling it again. Another advantage of using baking paper to roll out the dough is that it's easier to lift up the cookies from the paper. You can push your hand under the paper and sort of tip it over so that the cookie will fall onto your other hand. These cookies are ready to go into the oven. I've preheated the oven to 180 degrees Celsius. For this size and thickness of cookie, it will take about 18 minutes to bake. It's always a good idea to set your timer for a shorter time, so I'll set my timer for 15 minutes and then check on the cookies and decide if it needs further baking. These cookies have been baking for 18 minutes. I can smell the beautiful fragrance of the butter and sugar. It's just brown around the outside edges, and when I touch it feels firm. I'm going to leave it on the baking tray itself to cool down. Don't remove it from the tray too soon, or while it's still hot it might break easily. While the cookies are cooling down, we can continue to make the royal icing. This is the 15 grams of egg white that I separated earlier. Use an electrical hand mixer to start beating the egg whites until it is foamy. Once it's foamy, we will add the icing sugar gradually until we have a very thick, spreadable consistency. Use a spatula to scrape down the sides and check the consistency of the icing. It should just flow down very slowly from the spatula. You can then color the icing in as many colors as you like. I'm going to use blue, pink and white icing. So I'll separate a little bit for the blue and a little bit for the pink icing. Drop a small drop of food coloring and give it a good mix. It's quite important to work quickly as this royal icing will harden up if it's left unattended. So quickly stir and get it into the piping bags before it crusts up. It may look as if this is very little icing, but it will be more than enough for decorating the cookies that you've made in this recipe. These cookies are completely cooled down, and once it's cold you will find that it's really nice and crispy. It's a hard, crispy type of cookie. These can be decorated now. Start by cutting a small opening into the piping bags. I like to test it onto a piece of paper or just side of the baking tray to check that the icing comes out smoothly. This icing is designed to be a little bit thicker so that it is easier for children to handle. For this type of consistency, you can pipe lines or dots or simple words onto the cookies. It is not really suitable for flooding or covering the entire cookie. For that you will need a more liquid icing. So get your kids involved and enjoy decorating the cookies with lines, dots and words. Try to pay special attention to how I hold the bag and also where the point of the bag is. Yeah, we squeeze the bag from the back, so you're basically holding the piping bag in the ball of your hand, and when we squeeze the letters onto the cookie, the tip of the piping bag does not actually touch the cookie. It is just above the cookie to let the icing sort of fall onto the cookie. It will take about 15 minutes for the icing to dry up. Just leave it on the baking tray, touch it later to feel whether it's dry, and then keep it in an airtight container. I show you how my children decorate the cookies. Okay, sometimes what happens is the front bit of the icing in the piping bag, if you left it on the table for a while, the front tip of the icing will be dry up. Okay, what you have to do is to just squeeze out the front. Okay, just remove the front a little bit. Okay, you can wipe on a towel your fingers, and then it should come out. Okay, I want you to also take note how Eliana is holding the bag. Okay, so we're squeezing it from the back of the bag, okay, not the front. Okay, so the whole ball of your hand will hold it. Remember to give us a thumbs up and to subscribe to the channel if you want to catch all the latest videos. Bye bye!